face to face last week, and your journey is a very, very inspiring one. Before we get onto that,
yeah.
Well, different's good. Before we get onto that, would you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, before we go on to the journey?
Okay, I'm the CISO and global head of IT and head of information, head of business systems at a global company called Ubisense Limited. We're based primarily here in the UK with a strong presence in Germany and the USA. We've got a French connection, and we partner as well with Rakuten out in Japan. So it's 3 hats within the organization. Tech role, and then separate GLC. At the same time, however, if there are business processes which need to be streamlined and got a lot better, that is where I get involved with as well. So yeah, it's quite a complicated
So you've got
setup, but it works.
3 roles. 3 roles.
Three distinct roles.
Wow.
Complementary, but also distinct. And you've got to be careful when you move in between them.
If you've got 3 official roles, I'm sure it means you wear far more hats than that on a daily basis, really, Mike. Let's take a step back. So today is all about inspiring and helping people who are trying to either break into the industry or raise their game. And your story is fascinating. So could you please tell our audience where you've come from and how you've got to where you are today?
Okay. Obviously, just interrupt me with any questions. As some of you can gather from my accent, I'm actually South African. Born and bred in South Africa, but I live here in the UK at the moment. When I went to university, when I went through to university, I did archaeology, history, and classics. I've got a BA in history. I've got a BA and BA honors in archaeology. I've also got a master's and PhD in archaeology as well, and I actually direct an archaeology project in the Sudan in the present. In fact, that background there is the Blue Nile in the Sudan from a recent trip there. So in the last year in South Africa, which was 1999, I knew I was going to come through to the UK afterwards, and I had no idea what I actually wanted to do. Now, short version is my father had been at IBM, so the only other thing that I knew what to do was computers in some form or another. In fact, I was a bloody idiot at them for a long period of time. And I went and did my A+ certification at the end of 1999 and 3 Windows NT courses. I passed the A+ and failed all 3 Windows Windows NT exams. Came across here, and obviously that being the year 2000, it was a bit easier to get into the industry, into the IT industry to be more specific. And I got a contract role just 2 months after arriving at Oxford University Press as a second line support officer. So I skipped all the first line stuff, thank God. And that was a rolling contract to the end of the year. Then I got another contract, actually, ironically, at the Oxford Archaeological Unit for 8 weeks, and that was to build their network, transitioning from a work group to a domain. And then I was at Earthwatch Europe for a year after that. And then I did another contract role because I took a break and I did a year's master's for my archaeology. So another contract role. Then I moved up here to Cambridge because my then fiance was moving across to the UK, to Cambridge. She's now my wife, for anyone who's interested in that little trivia. And I joined Amadeus Capital Partners as their system administrator. This was December 2004. And over the course of those 4 years then that I was with them, I progressed to senior systems administrator. And due to some personal issues, the guy who was my line manager, he had to take a lot of breaks. And so quite a bit of the managerial responsibility at a very young age landed on my shoulders. They then hired a replacement IT manager, and she went and outsourced my role. So unfortunately, that was right at the start of the Great Recession. So obviously I hit the job boards, and I was extremely lucky that 1 month later I got hired as the IT manager for a company called the Institute for Government, which is an apolitical think tank based in London. It was founded by a former minister from Tony Blair's government, Lord David Sainsbury, member of the Gatsby Foundation. He headed the Gatsby Foundation, and also one of the family members for the Sainsbury supermarket group. I was the 13th staff member there, and I was part of a committee that oversaw move from renting 2 rooms in the Royal Academy of Engineering actually through into our own building in Carlton Gardens, and I was there as the IT manager for some 8 years. I decided I was hitting a plateau there and went out looking, and I got headhunted for another company called Dialight, which is an international company. And I was the IT manager for the entirety of Europe and Australasia. And while I was there, in fact, very shortly after I joined, because I'd always viewed security as being IT centric, I fell into that trap big time. While I was there, within the first couple of months after I'd started, the board of Dialight commissioned. Okay, I'll get onto your question in a sec. The board of Dialight had commissioned there to be a cybersecurity review of the organization for the London and the Farmingdale, USA, 2 headquarters. And that perked my interest because the questions that I got asked and that went around also with HR were far beyond anything that I had yet experienced with regards to security. Fast forward, there's a bunch of stuff there that I could get into, but it would be quite boring for a lot of you. And
it sounds to me like that's the most interesting part, Dr. Brass, isn't it?
Yes and no, because it delves into internal politics in a company that I don't really wish to expose. The ultimate outcome of that was that the person who was my line manager, who sat on the board and was the director of IT, she had to leave the organization. And I kept raising the issue that there's security matters that needed to be addressed. And so I got called into the CFO's office one day, and I got told, well, I've been promoted now to look after the cybersecurity for the entire organization. But based upon what was in that report and based upon what I wanted to do, I said to them, this extends beyond anything infrastructure-wise, this extends beyond anything IT. And the security person ideally needs to be outside of IT, needs to be a business security person. That bit was shut down, unfortunately, but I still had the responsibility, so I started implementing various measures. I got various authority to implement those measures, and then I got headhunted for my current company, where I've got a lot more carte blanche, and we've actually set everything up from scratch in the right way, with the right reporting structures, with the right GRC, Information Security Management Forum. And so that is the very short summary of how everything has evolved with me. In some ways, it's been very much a traditional route when you look at it. Going from into support officer, systems administrator, IT manager, doing all those sorts of basic IT security matters, and then transitioning into the actual business security environment. The key on a lot of this, though, is actually understanding business security risk management, which is an entirely different beast. And what I will point out is that there's a lot of when you're hired for a lot of the entry-level roles, and I should say also a lot of the junior roles, they are very much looking at the soft skills. Now, the soft skills is, yes, the usual. You're able to talk to the receptionist. You're able to talk to the person next to you. But it's a lot more than that. It's the ability and the skill set to decipher what people need, what the business needs, not what they're asking you to do, not what they think they need. You have to arrive at what is that end goal. what is that outcome and how can that be achieved? And that can be by, hang on, there's a couple of questions I really get to. So some home
let's
labs.
bring a couple in. Bring a couple in, Mike,
sorry?
if you can hear me.
Yeah,
Let's
I can
bring
hear
a couple of those in, shall we? So let's do the polite one first, because Colin did say not to interrupt, so I'm going to have to go with this question first, which is, here we go. When you get the chance, very polite, love it, Colin. Do firms practicing GRC ever seek counsel by boutique law firms that specialize in cyber? Good question.
That's actually a damn good question. And there are multiple ways to answer this. Now, to understand my answer, you've got to understand that I make a heavy distinction between cybersecurity, which to my mind is very much IT security and IT related security, and information security. And I define information security really as the GRC side of things. Now, it's at the GRC level, as the question is asking. Yes, you have to get specialized legal opinion, or particularly if you're dealing with PCI DSS laws, if you're dealing with HIPAA laws, and even if you're dealing with substantial in Europe. Germany's got certain laws. For the UK, it's obviously the GDPR, the UK Data Protection Act, etc., etc. And if you've got a substantial amount of PII, personally identifiable information, you need to have the legal framework in place to be able to protect all of that information. Which is okay if you've got somebody who knows the GDPR and your PII, for example, is just information about your employees and salary, etc., etc. All of that's quite easy to take care of. But if you're dealing with credit card information, if you're dealing with any kind of merchandise, then it's an entirely different ballgame. And yes, you absolutely should either have counsel on board internally who knows these laws and who can advise, or you need to bring in that expertise.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I suppose the specificness of the question was, do they seek counsel by boutique law firms? And I haven't got enough experience to comment on that, other than in different industries that I've worked in. It depends upon the firm and the relationships they have with their solicitors, because some firms may engage,
You're going to have some law firms which have no idea about PII, for example, and you're going to have some law firms, or at least some data privacy organizations, and I know of one in the UK that I regard very highly, who know the law inside out. And so you could bring on consultants in that regard rather than formal legal experts. Again, depending upon the entire context.
I do wonder.
The law firms that specialize, that have specialized departments in this, but you're not going to have one law firm that says, I'm only going to be doing this for GRC.
That's a very good point. Let's bring the next one up. So for Cestus, here we go. Recently landed a help desk job with the intent of gaining knowledge and experience to eventually break into Infosec. What are some? I suppose there's a couple of questions to come back to you there, if I can ask them before I carry on. Any particular area of Infosec that you want to break into would help. But the question then goes on to, what are some home labs I can work that would be essential for me to try my hands on? Any ideas on that, Mike?
That question confuses cybersecurity and information security.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yes, you've got to know me quite well in just a couple of sessions.
Let's talk about that, because again, from people breaking in, cybersecurity is a bit of a buzzword, in my opinion. Information security, I'm going to let you do the definition of it, but no, I'll let you do it. Go on. I'm not going to put the foot in it and get it wrong. Go on. I'm going to be quiet now. Here I go. Swoosh.
There are a number, and I've got a couple that are sitting on the blog. Sometimes there's such a variety out there that sometimes I look at them and think they're not even mutually exclusive. It's really to do with the usual people, processes, technology. People are the most important within it all. The information security is really looking at governance structures. It is looking at the risk management, and what people very much confuse compliance.
Yeah.
So the ISO 27001 is a security management compliance framework. Now, if you're compliant with it, that means you're meeting a certain minimum base standard. But that compliance can be achieved actually by any number of ways, unfortunately. And it provides a measure of reassurance. It provides a measure that you've got a security architecture in place at a conceptual and sometimes at a practical level. So you can help compare if you've got third-party suppliers, you're entering into partnerships. It eases all of that. Now, the real basis of that compliance is actually underpinned by governance. So when you're getting into all of this, when you're looking at people, processes, and technology, you have to start very much at the governance level within the organization. And once you've got the governance structure sorted out, that is when you can do your proper risk management. And it's on the back of the risk management that you can do your compliance work.
So that's a very good point. I want to move on. I'm conscious of time. We've got about half an hour left. I know you've got plans for the weekend. And I saw you bought a nice new fire pit last week, Dr. Brass, actually.
Yes, nice. I'm going to be using that this weekend.
I was in Lidl in the Middle for those, or the middle of Lidl today for those in the UK who know what that is, where they have an array of great stuff that you can waste your money on. And I think I saw your fire pit or one very similar. I might treat myself to on my first payday. Anyway, enough about fire pits. Next question. We've got one here from Mohan. Here we go. I'm an IT production support from Capital Markets Domain here in Toronto. I'd like to know how to get into GRC. What are the relevant certs that I could do to achieve CISO? That's a broad question. Let's see if you can answer that. And I'll also say our next guest is actually GRC from Toronto in Canada. So it might be worth holding that question for then as well. Let's get 2 answers on that, Dr. Mike. Come on.
Yeah, why not? Okay, I'm a CISO, but just remember that a CISO can be an end goal. It's not really a means to an end. And there are various other ways that you can actually achieve, how can I put this, a very good job within GRC. So you don't have to go straight for that CISO role. Obviously, if like myself, you enjoy that level of authority, a responsibility, and to some extent an autonomy in making a difference within the organization, then obviously go for it. To do the transition, I mean, there's Gerald Auger's online. He's got a course that it's basically as a pay as you go, pay as you can course. And that will give a lot of the fundamentals of what GRC is actually about. And I do highly recommend it. In terms of actually starting off within GRC, being in North America, I would strongly advise that you take a look at the NIST standards, the NIST risk management standard, or the other equivalent standards. Over here in the UK and in Europe, it's ISO 27001. That's a very good base to just get that fundamental understanding of what you need to explore within a business context. Second, I would start off, providing you've got the number of years of experience, I would start off with the CISM certification from ISACA. It is very good. It does focus primarily upon the governance, and it'll put a lot of things into the broader business framework. Obviously, at some other point, you can get the CISSP certification from IC Squared. I know some people disparage it. It is highly recommended, obviously, on your CV for HR to get past systems.
It's on most entry-level positions as a requirement as well.
God, please do not get me started on that bullshit.
Well, I've said that on purpose because I want you to get started on that a little bit.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
There's a number of domains within the CISSP. So it is 10 kilometers wide and 10 centimeters deep, and it's very much on purpose. Now, what you'll find to whoever does the CISSP is it does bring a lot of things within context. The exam's an absolute bastard, and it really does. It tests you to the limit. Some of the information within the CISSP is actually heavily outdated. And controversially, I will argue that happens to include the CIA triad. That should have been, the CIA triad should have frankly been scrapped some 20 odd years ago.
We could do a whole show.
There's better ways of describing, better ways of integrating. After that, there's the C-risk certification if you're wanting to do the risk management side. There's the CISA, also for my soccer, if you're wanting to go down the auditing side. And if you do go down the CISM side, I would highly recommend also the CISA as well, because you're going to get audited at some point and you'll gain that holistic understanding. In addition, your company, if you've got the right governance structures, is also going to have an internal audit function, which can either reside in the enterprise risk management, or you've got to be setting up that information security management forum yourself. And you'll need internal auditors. That internal auditor doesn't have to be yourself. In fact, it is advisable that it is not yourself, because your areas are going to get audited and they have to be audited independently. However, you have to know what to expect and you have to know what the auditor is going to do.
Absolutely. Look, I'm conscious of time. We've got so many questions coming in for you. You're the most popular yet, Dr. Mike. So there's a couple in here. A couple in here I want to pick up on because I know them both. First, Nick Nicanor Chavez. He has got extensive experience. Based in London, looking to re-enter the cyber world. Used to do pre-sales years ago. Find it quite difficult. Companies asking for years of experience, certs and tools one needs to master. And he moves on to the bit which I think is the reason he should be employed. How to transfer his manager, team, project, organization, CXO support into cyber to be taken into consideration? That's a great question, Nick. And from knowing you personally, you'd be an absolute asset to any organization. Mike, any ideas?
GRC. Yeah. Don't think about cyber security. Think about information security. Think about the GRC. And in particular, if you, with your background, and I'm assuming, I'm just going to act on an assumption, you've got some project management certifications, very likely Prince 2. If you've got ITIL, obviously that's service desk management, but it does help you understand what IT actually does and how IT is meant to function within the business. Definitely go down the CISM route, get it, and you will find some doors opening for you.
Thanks, Mike. That's really good advice. Next one is from someone else I know, a member of the Infosec Live community, which again, I haven't spoke about, and I should have done really. We were founded in June last year. I founded the community as a free platform for aspiring and existing cybersecurity professionals to kind of share best practice ideas and resources. Please come along and join. Click the link or type it in the browser and come and say hello. It'd be great to see you there. But one of the members of the community, Kerry, is struggling a bit at the moment to find some work, and he's banging his head against the brick wall. His comment there is he's done the GRC course from Gerald, and now what, basically? So I suppose for someone who hasn't perhaps got the managerial or project management experience, I'm making an assumption there, Kerry, that you haven't. I'm not sure if you have or not. What else could Kerry do, Mike?
I have been debating that because obviously I've seen Kerry's posts on the forum itself, and it is quite hard when you don't have the resources available to do certain studies that actually need to be done. My advice is actually to take a sideways move. Just because you've done Gerald's course, it's not accredited in any shape or form. Companies are not going to recognize that apart from continued education or experience. Unfortunately, that just is the truth. And that would be myself included if I was a hiring manager in looking at it. I would actually take a sideways move for the time being. I would look at doing some cloud security. That would get your foot within a company and would get a foot in a company pretty damn quick. If you do the Azure and AWS fundamentals and the two afterwards, I know money can be an issue in actually taking the exams, but the exams are quite cheap. So, but if you do that, and once you get your foot within the company, spend a couple of years, then you'll be able to move sideways into the GRC and be able to move upwards, because companies will be looking for that sort of career progression and would be able to financially support you in taking those certs.
Thanks, Mike. That's really good advice. Let's jump on to the next question. We've got a few here, so I want to keep pulling them up. This one is trying to land a position in the military as a cyber offensive defensive specialist. Should my self-prep learning path look any different than attempting to land a similar civilian career? What a good question.
It is. I don't know the military, so I'm not the best person to actually answer that.
Okay, well, look, I know we've got, let's have a look at the guests we've got on later. Jason Shockey, the sponsor of today's event, is a veteran, and he worked in cybersecurity within the military in the US. So if you can hang around for a little while, Jason's on in around about, well, it's under 2 hours now. And I'm sure
my answer is yes, but I can't give advice on the nuances.
As to the nuances, yeah. So let's hold that one for later. Thanks, Mike. And the next one, here we go. Where are we?
Is a good one from Mohammed.
This one. Let's do this one. We'll move on.
We do that one, and then I spotted another very good one there.
I'm a network security engineering student and want to expand my knowledge in the security field. I started this journey by taking a Linux course on Udemy. Brilliant. From your experience, what should be next? Another good question.
I mean, knowledge of Linux, you will hear time and time again. It depends exactly what your end goal is in terms of that. If it's penetration tester, etc., or you are within a very large organization that runs a lot of Linux servers, then obviously it's invaluable. Me, my Linux skills are highly limited, and they haven't held me back, but that's because I've got a different focus in terms of all of that. I would highly recommend you get your Security Plus.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, really good recommendation there. So moving on to Mohammed's, regarding the CompTIA Security Plus, how high of a regard does an exam like that hold? See, this is a tricky one because it's different in the US than it is the UK. For a start, would be my comment. And it says, because I've applied to countless jobs and rarely see CompTIA as a requirement. Mohammed, where are you based, first of all? Be interested to hear that. And Dr. Mike, any thoughts?
The Security Plus, I mean, it's a tricky one. It depends where you come in from. I'm not talking about a country. You will see it a lot more on job adverts in the USA compared to the UK or anywhere else in Europe. The knowledge, however, that you gain through those certs is what is valued here in the UK and throughout Europe. So if I go onto, say, jobserve.co.uk, I'm not going to see Security Plus listed. What I will see listed is the knowledge that you can gain through that Security Plus. And in particular, prospective employers will want to see how you've either attempted or have applied that knowledge in real life environments. And if you can't apply it within your job, you've got to somehow build a demo environment. You've got to find a way where you can demonstrate that you're attempting to apply this. And that could very well just as be taking a bigger role within projects. And if it's a technical project, then it can be within the actual project management of that and demonstrating how you're talking to different stakeholders. So yes, although it's not on job descriptions, the value of it is it places the IT security within a wider business context and starts you thinking about the business.
I think the thinking about the business part is a very valid point and one that isn't brought up much on any debates that I've seen. And there's two sides to that. So we see a lot of people struggling to engage with the C-suite is the terminology and get them to kind of adopt the recommendations that are going through. And you've also got the flip side to that, which is the importance of the ability to communicate with the IT team or the team the other side of the C-suite. So getting the message across, you know, we haven't got the funding this time because of this, you know, and getting them to understand the pressures that a business has and sometimes why they make the decisions they do. Because from an employee's point of view, someone who's never had any involvement in running a business, sometimes sometimes the decisions seem a bit strange, don't they?
Kerry's got a very good question as well about transferable skills. Now, just to put that, just to put that into context, When you're doing a university degree, like I was, you're interacting not only with your peers, you're interacting with students that are above you, you're interacting with lecturers, you're interacting with heads of department. At some point, you're interacting with lecturers from other departments, and you're already building up a whole bunch of soft skills in that regard. So, like when I joined Amadeus Capital Partners, all of a sudden, one of the heads of Amadeus is friends with the then Hungarian Prime Minister. Suddenly, you're thrust into a world that is different, but you're equipped with the actual skills to do this. And it can be some of the simplest little things. I gave this example to Simon, and I'll be quick. When I started there, I had a tendency to stay within a particular room, and there was an area where all the PAs were sitting. And at one point, a couple of months into my being there, I had to install one printer for them. And so all I did was spend a couple of hours there doing the job, talking with them. And to me, it was nothing. It was just putting in a bloody printer, ultimately. But that engagement and that ability to just be able to talk at a professional level with anybody, and it turned their perception of me around from somebody who can do the job but is just there in the corner, didn't really want to talk, etc., to he's actually quite approachable. So in terms of the transferable skills, there are a lot. There's everything from the customer interaction. There's accountancy work that needs to be done. There's talking with line managers. There's understanding the entire business context. In fact, on one of the CISSP courses that I did, the instructor, as was an online course, the instructor was given an example of a hairdresser who had transferred and had done the CISSP exam without any IT security background whatsoever, because what she did within those businesses as a hairdresser meant she actually met quite a bit of the experience requirements. So yeah, there's a bunch of transferable skills. My advice in looking at that is to go to the IC Squared website. It lists the domains, it lists the experience that is needed, lists what's covered. You can take that list, you can write a separate list, and this applies to anybody. Write a separate list of what your experiences are across your different companies and different sectors that you have worked in. And then you can sit down and actually compare, and you can work out where your strengths and weaknesses are lying. Just because you've got experience in a non-IT sector or non-GRC specific sector doesn't mean you're siloed in any shape or form, despite what quite frankly, some arseholes out there say.
There's oh, now we're talking about arseholes. We can stay on that for a bit. There's so much misinformation out there, and I know My Cyber Path is our sponsor, but it does really relate to what Dr. Mike is saying. There's a free version on mycyberpath.com. I'll drop that in the chat, where it aligns you based on a personality questionnaire and some other questions as to what particular roles you might excel at or find interesting in the information security or cybersecurity industry. And it's having the ability to open your eyes and look to see what there is and be aware of other roles and speak to as many people as you can who do the different jobs and find out what they actually mean. Because I've said this before, I thought I wanted to be a pen tester until I spent time with pen testers and realized how much reporting they do, which is my idea of, you know, it isn't quite as much. It is fun, don't get me wrong. And I'm saying that with a bit of pill in my mouth because I failed the OSCP, but you know, reporting is a big part of it. And if you don't want to be sitting there putting reports together for clients, look for another thing. And that's what I've done in the industry. I've pivoted, ended up going back to doing what I was doing before, which effectively is relationship management. And this is an industry that's crying out for people with essential skills, soft skills, and the ability to develop and maintain relationships.
You will find many people who are encouraging. You will also find many people, particularly in a business environment, who will attempt to silo departments, to silo people, to keep in straitjackets. The best advice that I can give is always fight back against that. Silos are not good. They will ruin your career.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's the problem, I'm not going to start picking on organizations of different sizes, because you get issues in all organizations, but sometimes the bigger the organization, the more layers of complexity and the more layers of idiots in the way throughout the recruitment process. And I had this conversation with a business owner last week whose own experience with, I suppose, seeing companies recruit from within for cybersecurity is you've got to have all the cogs in place for it to work. You know, you've got your recruiters at the bottom, then your managers, then the higher level. They've all got to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And the problem is, at the moment, they're not. A lot of the time, you know, as we alluded to earlier, Dr. Mike, the request for CISP as a requirement for an entry level role, it just shows you how out of touch perhaps these companies are.
Very much so. And the last point I'd make is, unless somebody has got other questions, etc., is remember that you are not protecting business assets. You are helping the business achieve its strategic objectives with the minimum amount of risk.
That's a very, say that again, because that's a really good description. I'm going to write
it down. Many people think that IT security or cybersecurity is there to protect assets, and that could be physical assets or information assets. Now, those assets are there for a reason. They are there in a decent organization who has got a full asset inventory, etc. They are there for a reason. They are there to help the different departments and different people achieve the objectives within their role and their department's role, which in turn has its own function within how the business wants to achieve its objectives, the objectives that are set out at board level for the business in the business strategy. So your function is to minimize the risk to those business objectives. And that can be achieved by any number of ways. But ultimately, all of this comes down to governance and risk management.
Very good. I've written most of that down, but I'm going to have to bring you again after the weekend and get you to do it again, because it was such a well put statement. We've got some more questions. Let's get them up before you have to jump off. So let's bring this here. We've got from Chad. I'm in America. I've been a database admin for 15 plus years. Any specific sec position like database background? And if yes, any other tech skills needed for those security positions? So what upskilling could they do, perhaps?
Thinking about that one. I'm not too sure, because a database administrator is going to have other responsibilities at the same time. Unless you're within a huge enterprise, and you could be doing MySQL or SQL database administration. But even then, you're going to be having to interact with the finance department, sales departments. You're going to have to do quite a few of that side of things. So you might be able to be moving into the software development side. You could very easily, with those types of skill sets, be moving into penetration testing, or you might decide you want to do project management.
There's so many transferable skills from what you're doing at the moment. I think my comment would be the industry's your oyster within a certain regard, because there's a lot that's transferable that you could quickly upskill on. I'd make the decision on what path you want to take before you make the decision on where to upskill, perhaps. Just coming back to a comment from Colin, sorry, I missed this one. Do you have a Discord channel? I think so. I'm nearly 50. My Discord knowledge is Slack, just to coin another communication technology phrase. We do have, but we don't use it much. The Infosec Live community is built on an independent platform, so we tend to do most stuff on there. I'm not to doing more on Discord. I just don't know enough about it, Colin. With regards to others who would benefit from the ecosystem that is Infosec Live, anyone in the industry, especially those who are looking to upskill their soft or essential skills. I've personally put some courses together myself, which are free in the community. One's on goal planning and one's on soft skills. And even if you watch them through to give you some pointers to help with interview techniques, whether it's active listening or preparing to be pretending to be empathetic, even if you can't, you know, some of the tips and tricks that you can use, jump in the community and have a look. So thanks, Colin. I'll come back to them again. Colin, you've thanked Dr. Mike for his comments and me. Thank you very much. And Pineapple, I can't even say the name. Squinting with my old eyes here. I have a few years in sales and account management, currently in a boot camp for Cybersec, looking to get into the field and take my security and network plus. What job should I be aiming for? Me personally, I think it depends what particular one excites you. If you've got years in sales and account management, my experience is sales, business development, and I've come in at a fairly high level for a firm, helping them with their relationship development, management, and strategic partnership. So my answer to that question would be, if you don't want to come in on a completely technical role to start with, maybe come in on one of the ones which utilizes those soft skills, which will enable you, once you've got the foot in the door, perhaps to then go into a more technical role. Mike, any comments?
Not much to add to that.
You can't say
Again, I would emphasize that the cloud security is a huge growing field. So if you wanted to get into that side of things, I would get in.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? We've got some more here as well. So Nathan Turner, Nathan asks, is working remotely a reasonable goal for this industry? And do you lose something tangible as a SOC analyst there physically? The number of companies offering remote seems very, very low.
I do think remote working is here to stay. I would say more hybrid working. Now, the penetration test, I'm answering this in a roundabout way. The penetration testing companies that I have dealt with are all still mostly working remotely. Their penetration testers are either completely remote or hybrid. Now, in terms of an actual SOC environment, this becomes a lot more difficult because you are not the only person. You are part of a team that are analyzing multiple companies at the same time. Now, obviously, depending on where you are, there would have been a setup for either a few months or for a couple of years where you would have had to have been remote. The systems that have traditionally been in place for the SOC environments will mean that most of those companies would prefer to have you back within that big environment, unfortunately. The pressure, however, that I see coming from companies like myself would be that I prefer a hybrid environment. So I would foresee over the next couple of years that there would be more remote working possibilities. And for a SOC analyst, I don't see that happening immediately.
I mean, the only experience I could speak from is I work for a firm who do penetration testers. We've got over 20 testers within the firm, and all of them work remotely. In fact, the one I spoke to this morning for the first time, we've been chatting for half an hour, getting to know him because I've only just joined the company, and asked him whereabouts in the UK he was, and the answer was the Philippines, which I thought was pretty amazing. And he's decided in a few weeks' time he's going to go and work in Bali for 9 months. I mean, the opportunities for working remotely in the right role, or the specific roles, are there. However, am I glitching?
No,
am I back?
I was reading by Purple Otter the remark there that I didn't know the Palo Alto Network's SOC environment is fully remote. Wow. I know the Sophos SOC environment is not fully remote. We don't utilize the Sophos SOC, but a friend of mine does. And there are some within the UK that most certainly are not remote. So I'm glad to see that pressure is already continuing, shall I say. But unfortunately, it's not widespread.
Thank you. Just a quick comment here from Mr. Paul Cummings. How are you, sir? Spoke to you briefly earlier. Whole Cyberhuman Initiative, doing some amazing things and breaking down some barriers for entry to this industry. Don't discredit data analysts. When quantum nano becomes commercial, it could end up the highest paid field for creating those data lakes. That is a great point, and brings me on to, if you don't mind me mentioning this quickly, whilst catching up with the Bramfit team this week, I spoke to, it was yesterday, their specialist in auto security. So who does all the testing for automotive cars, etc. And this guy's background, he did 10 years at Halfords, is where he started his career. So you talk about transferable skills. This guy started off in a customer service role in Halfords, which is for people who aren't in the UK, they are a chain of MOT bike service centres, also sell parts and all sorts of stuff here. And he worked his way up through fitting car stereos, telephones, etc., learned the engineering side, and he is now by far the leading tester for any IoT device ever for our firm. And it just goes to show those transferable skills. I bet you 20 years ago when he started working at Halfords to get the body kit for his car to toss up and down the road, that he never thought he'd be one of the highest paid testers in the UK. So the opportunities there are for everyone. And we've got still a few more questions left and we're running out of time desperately.
Yeah,
So,
there's one from the whole Cyberhuman Initiative.
yeah,
They've made a comment that I completely disagree with,
come
saying
on, then.
companies are less inclined to hire career shifters who haven't been in tech. Now, if you're talking about shifting into systems administration, if you're talking about shifting into penetration testing or into defense, that comment is correct. If you're talking about shifting into pre-sales, into project management, into auditing, that comment is absolutely incorrect. So
Okay.
it very much depends upon context.
I completely agree with you. I know what Paul's trying to say there. I think what he's saying is demonstrating what you've learned by building home labs, etc., and providing that social proof of what you can do and how you can relate that to a job.
You've got to sell yourself. You've got to demonstrate the relevance of your different skills to the job that you're applying or the sector of the industry that you're applying in. Absolutely. Do you need that tech background? Sometimes it is an advantage. Sometimes it isn't, and that it's not needed. There's so many diverse roles. And again, it's bringing me back to the difference between what is cybersecurity, what is information security, and the absolute myriad of different roles that are available within. So I'm against blanket statements, I'm afraid. You're on mute.
Look at that. I was just pretending not to speak. I was trying to do two things at once. I was just messaging our next guest who's due to be on in a minute. So I wanted to make sure that they were turning up. I want to just wrap things up now. Mike, any last comment for everyone watching? It's been an absolute insight and a wonder as usual. Please give some last thoughts and some wise words to our members before you go.
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, so everyone's happy to contact me. And every couple of days, Kerry would see that I sometimes post on the Infosec Live. Look, you've just got to understand it's a complicated couple of industries. You've got to understand the different contexts. So feel free to always reach out. That bloody phrase, I don't like reach out. It feels like I'm texting somebody else. Just feel free to get in contact with the different people who are actually within the industry. Don't take advice, whether it's my own, whether it's Richard Diston's advice, whether it's a bunch of other people's advice is the absolute gospel. You've got to understand your own context, take it for guidance, work out your own pathway. And the moment you've got your own pathway worked out, that is when the specialist advice can kick in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to bid you farewell now and hope to catch up next week with you anyway. Enjoy that fire pit. Have a lovely time with the family and we'll speak to you soon.
Right. Thanks all.
Cheers, Mike. So, excellent. What a great session with Dr. Mike there. So before we move on to Parul Khanna, I just want to say another thank you to our sponsor, My Cyberpath, who's made today possible and it to be free.